Crimson Desert teve mais um vídeo aqui da IGN nesse IGN First. Dessa vez eles conversaram com os desenvolvedores do jogo para poder ter mais detalhes das mecânicas. Então chega mais, rapaziada, e vamos dar uma conferida aqui no vídeo. Eu vou comentando com vocês.
Slash your way through enemies with repeated presses of the attack button. And if you equip your protagonist, Cliff, with a sword, you can certainly do that. But tap two of your controller's face buttons together and he'll lunge, thrusting the blade directly forward. If you then press both the light and heavy attack buttons at the same time, he'll transition into a powerful, magic-infused overhead slam, bringing his sword down in an arc of dizzying particle effects. There's more than one way to swing a sword, basically. And
Isso era uma coisa, inclusive, que eu tava vendo muita gente que jogou, né, o Crimson Desert em eventos e tal, comentar, é que o jogo ele tem muita coisa pra fazer. É tipo, até uma parada que chega até a sobrecarregar um pouco de tanta coisa que tem pra fazer. Mas como eu falei, às vezes pode ser uma coisa que, pô, o cara tá jogando numa demo de evento, então já liberou mais coisa, pode ser que devagarinho fica melhor pra gente entender, né?
Applies to everything in your combat arsenal. Transition from aiming a bow into a dodge roll, and you'll trigger a brief window of medieval Matrix slow motion, perfect for scoring a headshot. Cast a spell at the apex of a jump, and you'll launch yourself into the air, riding the energy of the magic's blast. And, in perhaps the most entertaining example, hold two face buttons in conjunction with shifting the direction of the left analog stick to unleash a variety of increasingly amusing wrestling moves, from simple grapples to human hammer throws. For this month's IGN First, we spoke to the design team at Crimson Desert developer Pearl Abyss to learn how they crafted this deep, multi-layered combat system. The very first thing they said was both surprising and helped contextualize everything. One of the key inspirations for Crimson Desert's combat was retro arcade games like Samurai Showdown, Final Fight, and King of Fighters. Suddenly, all those multi-button combos and link moves make much more sense. But those fighting game combos are not necessarily the thing that Pearl Abyss intended to replicate. The team cites the strong sense of impact that comes with each blow, both inflicted and received, as a key aspect they wanted to capture. That's clear not just in the visuals, but in the crunchy audio. The sound design team directly references Capcom as an inspiration. But across the 10 different boss battles I've fought so far, plus plenty more skirmishes in the open world, it's clear that there's more to it than that. Fighting game characters have access to many different moves that can be chained together to create unique approaches and strategies. Open world games, on the other hand, typically have a much more restrained moveset. A dodge, an attack, and a counter, for instance. But despite being a fantasy open world game itself, Crimson Desert's long list of combat moves seems to be gunning for the breadth of options that fighting games thrive on. Cliff's ever-expanding ability tree means there's a multitude of ways to approach any fight. It's not just ranged versus melee, but the more minute choices within those options. Will you weave kicks and suplexes into your sword fight, channel lightning down your blade, use whistling arrows to summon artillery strikes?
Legal.
The important takeaway here is that Pearl Abyss refuses to provide any real strict definition for Crimson Desert's combat system. Unlike
Acho que minha maior preocupação com isso tudo é... Beleza, tem um monte de coisa que a gente pode fazer, pra porradagem que a gente pode fazer. Mas o quanto disso que vai ser necessário, sabe? Porque eu acho que o que brilha mais esses jogos não é a quantidade de coisas que você pode fazer, é como você faz essas coisas. Então, por exemplo, a gente pode fazer um wrestling, ok. O wrestling ele é melhor contra um certo tipo de inimigo... Ou, sei lá, eu posso fazer o wrestling e ele vai fazer a mesma coisa que eu fazer um combo de espada. É ficar apertando o quadrado na espada. Entendeu? Então são coisas que a gente tem que fazer. O wrestling, então eu jogo o cara em cima do outro. Tá. Eu não tenho um negócio que eu dou uma voadora com a lança. É a mesma coisa que isso faz. Entendeu? Essa é a minha preocupação. É tipo, ter um monte de coisa, mas elas não têm nenhum propósito. Elas só estão ali pra ter uma quantidade de coisa.
something like Batman Arkham, there's no rhythm or pattern to follow. The combat team told me that they had no interest in creating a game where you have to respond to on-screen prompts by pressing specific buttons, the kind of system we've seen in games like Mad Max, Shadow of Mordor, and both Marvel's Avengers and Spider-Man games. Instead, the studio aims to fulfill a player's fantasies by allowing them to do whatever they want in any situation. That arguably makes Crimson Desert's approach to battle a bit loose, and for some, the distinct lack of rules or rhythm may be frustrating. There are no hard counters for particular enemies, for instance, nor any kind of strict rock-paper-scissors relationships between different attack or defense types. A particular weapon may be stronger against shielded enemies, for instance, but there's no requirement for you to use it. The same applies to bosses. While they
Tudo bem, isso aí eu acho legal. Tipo, ele não te obriga, tipo assim, se você não atacar o cara do escudo com uma, sei lá qual que vai ser a defesa, a vantagem contra o escudo, machado, enfim, que seja. Se você não atacar o cara com machado, você não vai ganhar a luta. Não, isso aí eu acho cagado, isso aí eu acho forçado. Mas é legal de ter um incentivo, né? Você ter, tipo assim, uma recompensa por você usar a melhor estratégia pra aquele tipo de inimigo, pra aquela coisa, né? O que vocês acham sobre isso? Deixa no comentário. Tanto faz? Ou você prefere que tenha algum elemento desse tipo assim?
Certainly have attack patterns that can be memorized and weaknesses that can be exploited, Polar Abyss has no interest in demanding you pay attention to that. The team believes that any method of attack should be valid. Well, within reason. You can't swing a 500-pound monster by its ankles, of course.
Tá. Não sei sobre isso, clã.
This, there if you
sei,
want it,
cara.
but no worries if you don't approach, extends out into the world itself. The black space engine that
Parece que eu
powers
tô fazendo
Crimson
monte de
Desert is
ataque que
able
não
to simulate
tem muita
elemental
importância, não sei.
reactions. So water can either freeze or conduct electricity when struck by the correct spell, while wood will burn and smolder when set alight. The combat team cites the modern Legend of Zelda games as inspiration for this, in which there's constant interaction between you and the environment. But this is very much a system that you can master and exploit if you choose to, rather than a core component of combat. For instance, there won't be a boss battle where you have to freeze water to hold your foe in place, or coax them into a metal grid you can then electrify with a lightning spell. Cliff is not a wizard, and so his spells come courtesy of a bracelet that grants him simple mastery over fire, ice and lightning. But new weapons and gear help expand his ability set further than the unlocks available on your skill tree. There's a spear, for instance, which opens up like a propeller and blasts enemies with bursts of wind like a deadly Airzuka, and a sword that summons an angry genie-like creature. The further you progress though, the wilder these options become. Cliff is able to ride a number of mounts, which in the early hours are simple horses with no remarkable talents. But head into the territory held by the Black Bears faction and you'll be able to saddle up on a massive grizzly, which can swipe at foes with sharpened claws, effectively thinning out herds of barbarians. Fast forward a few hours and things become stranger still. Your simple horse could be traded for a raptor. Yes, you can ride on the back of a literal dinosaur. If you prefer your scaly mounts to fly and breathe fire, then Crimson Desert also has that covered too. Fantasy's most important creature is present and correct here, and in the game's later hours you'll be able to command Tristar the Dragon, who will swoop in at your beck and call. But that's not the wildest option. Dispelling any notion that this is a typical high fantasy video game, in Crimson Desert, you can pilot a mech. Yes, really. The Dwarven Engineered Battle Robot is a late-game treat that asks the question, what if a Bioshock Big Daddy and a Titanfall mech had a baby? Equipped with thrusters, machine guns, multi-target lock homing rockets, and a wide-radius EMP blast, your sword and board-wielding enemies don't stand a chance. Fire-breathing dragons and machine gun-toting mechs could absolutely destroy Crimson Desert's balance, but they've been carefully plotted on the campaign's overall power curve. Pearl Abyss's combat team explains...
Cara, então, ele falou sobre isso, né? Você pode quebrar um pouco o jogo. Eu acho que... Então, visto que eles responderam essa parada sobre estratégia, né? De não ter um golpe que ele é melhor contra um certo tipo de inimigo, é só o golpe meio que tanto faz. Eu acho que eles estão fazendo um jogo pra você desligar o cérebro. Só joga. Ah, você quer dar 5 mortal pra frente e atacar o inimigo? Você pode fazer isso e vai funcionar da mesma maneira. Eu tô achando que vai ser essa pegada do jogo, sacou?
that such mounts are not designed to be simple tools that you can use whenever you want, and so all of the robot's destructive devices drain a limited fuel gauge, which, when depleted, will put the machine out of action. This means you can't just use this modern marvel of technology in perpetuity. You won't be able to stroll up to a boss battle and decimate a knight with your stock of missiles. But when you are in the pilot's chair, there's no denying that things become more of a massacre than an even matchup. Pearl Abyss is happy with this power spike though. The team considers it something of a present or a reward for players who have progressed so far into the game. As you can see, there is a wide range of combat options to say the least, and that brings us back to the fighting game comparison. Something like Street Fighter is arguably the inverse of Dark Souls. As in a From Software game, the true challenge is learning everything about your enemy and then attempting to exploit that, whereas in a fighting game, the challenge is to learn everything about your character and master their moveset. Pearl Abyss subscribes to the Street Fighter approach, and explains that the goal is for Crimson Desert's difficulty to become increasingly more manageable the more you master Cliff's abilities. That's easier said than done though. Like a fighting game, there's the sense that every one of Cliff's actions has an alternate version if you combine it with the right skill. This naturally creates depth, but also complexity. Dive in without any instruction, and it can feel quite overwhelming. In an attempt to keep things as simple as possible, Polybus has put a lot of focus on what each button does. The idea is that there's consistency in every action. If you want to introduce an element into an action, you build on your existing knowledge of the controller. Clicking the thumbsticks, for instance, fires magic spells from your palms. Click the left stick to use your left palm, click the right stick to use your right palm. And so to do a triple jump, which is powered by your magic spells, you string together an L3, R3, L3 combo, rather than tap the jump button 3 times.
Tá, mas então a gente usa o negócio com o L3
At first glance,
e o
Crimson
R3?
Desert certainly looks like many other open world games, and that's not an unfair comparison. As we'll explore later in this month's IGN First, there are plenty of genre staples here, from puzzle dungeons to faction quests to bounties posted on the town bulletin boards. In totality, this is not an unusual game, but zoom in on the combat and you'll find quite an unusual beast. It's built atop the classic staples. There's still dodges and parries and regular attacks, but never before have I played a medieval fantasy game where I can chain Spider-Man's swing into Batman's glide, into a ground pound that's delivered like Sonic the Hedgehog doing his best Hulk impression. In short, it's safe to say that Crimson Desert is trying something different. For more from Crimson Desert, check out our exclusive gameplay videos, and be sure to stick with IGN throughout the entire month of October for even more insights into this fantasy open world adventure.
E aí, rapaziada, o que vocês acharam aí desses detalhes do Crimson Desert, principalmente em relação à gameplay, cara? Pô, eu confesso que eu esperava uma outra coisa, né? Não é o que eu esperava. Eu esperava do jogo que, pô, tivesse, né? Geralmente quando a gente vai nesses jogos, mesmo que não seja um RPG, né? Ele não é um RPG, eles já falaram várias vezes isso. Mas eu esperava que ainda tivesse um ponto, sabe? De você ter uma... Eu esperava ele ser um pouquinho mais estratégico, visto a quantidade de coisas que eles têm, sabe? De que essas coisas elas tivessem sido colocadas ali por algum propósito. Mas o propósito parece ter sido só... Faz o que você achar melhor, né? Não tem uma estratégia profunda pra você poder usar, igual a gente vê em alguns outros jogos, esse ponto, né? Mas, cara, isso aqui é tudo questão de entrar com a mentalidade certa aqui na parada. Talvez eu tava com a mentalidade errada do que seria o jogo. Então, vamos ver se eu entrar pro jogo e tipo assim, não imagino que vai ser um jogo muito profundo em relação ao gameplay, ele vai ser só tiro, porrada e bomba. Vamos ver se vai digerir um pouco melhor. Concorda comigo, rapaziada? Deixa abaixo nos comentários suas opiniões. É claro, molecada. Curtiu aqui o vídeo. Não esquece de deixar aquele crítico no like. Se inscreve no canal e segue a gente nas nossas redes sociais. Vou ficando por aqui. Um grande abraço pra vocês. Até mais. E fui!